Hi everyone. Today I am making some cards with the Apple Harvest stamp set. This is a newer stamp set from the July to December mini catalog, and I really like this one. I'm thinking back to school in my head, and so I think that's why I was drawn to the apples, but I'm not going to use it as a back to school. I'm going to use it for the Hope You Are Feeling Better. I need a card for my card buffet, and I like to have a wide variety of reasons for cards, I guess. So thank yous, birthdays, things like that. And I was thinking a get well would be perfect. So I'm going to add this to my card buffet for August. And then I was trying to decide which image to use. I really like this one with the inside of the apple. I like the plain apple, but that reminded me more of teachers. So then I went with this one. I'm going to do this one. And then I thought, do I watercolor? Do I colored pencil? What am I going to use? So I decided to go with a video showing you a variety of ways to color, because I love to color, and this is a really fun one to use different coloring techniques. So that's what we're going to do. So I have a few different ways we're going to color. I've got Stampin' Blends. Love these. I've got watercolor pencils from Stampin' Up. I love these. You can see I use these quite a bit. And then I've got watercolor straight from the ink pad, and I like to do that as well. So we're going to try out the different mediums, and then I'll show you what they look like, and you can decide which one you like the best. So I'm going to start with what am I going to start with? I'm going to start with watercolor because it's my favorite. Now I'm going to show you two different ways. I'm going to show a lined technique and then what we call no line watercolor. Now if there is a line, it's just very, very faint, so that what you really get is the image without a line, so it kind of looks like you painted it without any outline whatsoever. And then I'll do this one with the lines. So I thought I would try both ways, and rather than have you watch entire coloring jobs over and over and over again, I'll do part of it and then I'll show you the finished product. Hopefully that makes sense. So to watercolor, you need a water resistant ink pad. So I'm using StazOn Jet Black ink for this image here, and I have to say I really liked the way this stamped. It was very crisp. I love the little shading, so I'm really happy with that imagery first off. Then I want to tell you what I'm going to use. I'm going to use the water brush, and this comes in 3 sizes. I'm going to use the really small skinny tip one because this image has lots of little small areas. So I'm going to do that. Now when I use my watercolor, my water brush, I like to use the Stampin' Scrub just to kind of clean my brush in between colors. So I'm going to keep that right next to me. And then I am going to go ahead and start. So I'm going to squeeze the barrel of my brush and some water comes out. I don't know if you can see that on the video. And then I paint straight from my lids. I just do that all the time, and I love to do it, so my lids are going to look a mess. You'll see as we go through. So I'm going to get the water dripping, and then I'm going to add some to this little lid here. Now if you don't like to mess up your lids, you don't have to. You can take a little block and get it full of ink and paint right off of there, so you don't have to be as messy as me. So I'm going to get some water flowing here, and I'm going to do this apple, and I want to start by kind of giving it a light go over with a pretty wet brush. If you were to go on here with a pretty dry brush, that line would be so stark, it would, that line that you touch the paper, it wouldn't flow throughout. So you do want to have a wet brush, and then you can go back in and do layers. So I can add some dark to the sides, and I can squeeze get more water and blend that out. Now you do have to use paper that can handle watercolor techniques. So what I'm stamped on is shimmery white. We also have watercolor paper. I love the shimmery white to paint on. It's really smooth. It doesn't have as much soaking in time as watercolor paper, so you do have to work quickly. But I just love that shimmer, that little added shimmer that you get. Alright, so I've done an apple. let me do a leaf. I'm going to use a Granny Apple Green, of course. And again, my lids are a mess. So I'm going to get some, I cleaned the color off of my brush, and now I'm just going to get some Granny Apple Green. I like to work away from the initial one, so I'm going to come over here to this leaf. And I'm going to do a light layer all over. And then I'm going to get, now if you go straight on with the dark, you can get a little bit of dark to show, but it'll kind of fade out a little bit. So if you let it just sit for a little bit longer before you add that darker layer, see it's kind of fading out and you're not really seeing that dark as much. If you give it just a minute, I mean, this dries so fast. If you give it just a minute, it'll dry and then you can add some dark detailing. So I'm going to add some dark to the center of the leaf. And if you think you have too much ink on there, you can clean your brush off. Now, ink does not work the same as watercolor. You're not going to be able to do different lifting techniques like you would with watercolor. It's just a different, I don't know what the difference is pigment-wise. Is it more of a suspended pigment? I'm not sure. But it is different. It doesn't behave exactly like watercolor, but you can get some really pretty watercolor looks with your ink, and I just think it's really fun. It's a fun way to do it. Let me show you my finished watercolor one. Here it is. So this is what I was doing here. Here I used Poppy Parade, and here I wanted to use the new color. So this is Sweet Sorbet, but the greens are the same, Granny Apple Green. So that's watercolor with Stays On ink. And then I wanted to show you no line watercolor. Now that is trickier. So you're going to take a very pale color. I'm using Sahara Sand, and even though this is a light color, I'm going to make it even lighter by once stamping off before going directly onto my paper. So that means, stamping off means I'm going to ink it up, and I'm going to stamp it once off to the side on my scratch paper before going onto my shimmery white or watercolor paper, whatever you're going to use. And that means it's very light. So you can see the colors here, you can see that outline, but it is very pale. And then when I watercolor over this, because I'm not even using a waterproof ink, those lines are going to leave. So it's really careful. You have to keep track of where you're at. Don't lose your leaves in the process. So I don't need this anymore. I'm going to paint another leaf. And so I've got my pen all nice. Now here there's two leaves next to each other, and if I were to just go ahead and paint them all green, I would lose those shapes. I wouldn't know which leaf, what part was what. So I'm kind of going over the entire thing with a light wash of Granny Apple Green. And then I'm kind of going away from that one, and I'm going to come over here. And I'm going to do a different leaf that's farther away. And the veins are kind of still staying. I think I'm getting lucky there, but I think they will start to fade, I think. Fade away as that water soaks in. Shimmery white cardstock is interesting because it's kind of like the cardstock has a shimmery coating on it. So the ink sits on top for just a little bit longer, and then it's gonna, so you can see the ink from the veins is starting to bleed out a little bit on that one. So I'm skipping around over here. Alright, I'm going to let the green dry for just a minute, and now we're going to add in some of this Sweet Sorbet. So I'm squeezing, I cleaned my barrel, my brush tip. I'm going to squeeze the barrel to get some water in here, and now I'm going to grab this apple and start to paint it. Okay, so I've got a light wash over the whole thing. I'm going to let it sit. I'm going to move on to a different one. Because again, if I were to try to add some darks to that, it would probably start to just fade into the other one because it's still wet, and that'll just disperse my ink and it'll kind of go away. Maybe it's dry enough. So I'm just going to add some dark to the sides, give some round shape to that apple. And I'm kind of giving another little swoop next to the leaf, like as if maybe the shadow of the leaf is causing it to be darker underneath there. Okay, and now let's add some darkness to this apple, just to give it some roundness. Kind of makes it more round, doesn't it, when you add some dark to the sides. And I was playing around a little bit where you can add a little bit of yellow to your apple. So I cleaned my brush and I'm picking up a little bit of yellow and I'm going to add it here just to give it a little shine of yellow. And I'll do that on this one. It's a little bit dry, so maybe it's too late. We'll see. Just add a little bit of yellow there. Okay. So now for the branch, I just grabbed Sahara Sand, another good one. Actually, maybe I'll use instead some little darker soft suede. And I'm just going to pick up some soft suede and do the stem. And you want it to look watercolor, so you don't want it to just be a solid color. You want to go in and add some darks and lights. So I'm just kind of adding some dark to that. Okay. Now my greens are dry, so I'm going to go back in and add some darks to the green. And so I kind of, my veins are gone because they just kind of got swallowed up in the water. So I'm going to go in and add the veins with my brush. Just kind of adding some dark like that. Not too perfect because it's supposed to look watercolory, so I'm kind of moving my brush around. Now this one got a little feathery. It had too much water sitting on the top, and then what happens is it kind of spills over. That's like the surface tension kind of got off. So I'm going to try and clean it up a little bit, see if I can. It usually doesn't happen. Of course it does today because I'm making a video. But I'll show you the one I did earlier so you can see the finished one. And it doesn't have any feathered out little leaves like that. Ooh, very dark. So that's what happens if you get a lot of ink on your brush. I'm going to just go ahead and darken up this one then, so that when I'm done, it'll be more than that in dark. All right. Sometimes when you're trying to do something for video, it doesn't work out as well. But let me show you the finished one. This is No Line Watercolor. It's done the same way on shimmery white. Same colors, except here I used Poppy and here I'm using Summer or Sweet Sorbet. So that's No Line Watercolor. And those are my watercolors. Now it is also fun to do watercolor with an embossed image. So here I did the same thing, watercolored, but first I embossed the image in white. And then what that does is kind of nice because the embossed rim of the image, that slick raised rim where you put the embossing powder, kind of acts as a fence for your ink. So you can kind of really, I found, paint much faster and just kind of let the ink go in the middle, and it kind of, I just went down the vein and it kind of spread out along the vein. So sometimes painting an embossed image is really fun. And then I did it again in copper just for a different look. So that's a fun way to do it. So those are no line watercolor, lined watercolor, and then we've got some embossed watercolor. All right, so those are the watercolor ones. Now I want to show you what it looks like in the Stampin' Blends. Let me get rid of my ink pads. And then I'll show you what I did with the cards afterwards too. Okay, so we're going to do blends. So here I stamped in Memento ink, and you can't use StazOn, that waterproof ink. You can't use that when you're using with blends because they're the same. So they're both alcohol based, and what would happen is these are meant to blend. So that black line would then blend also, so it would smear. So you don't want to do that. So I've got, let's see, what colors I thought I might use. All right, so for this one, I'm going to start with, I'll just start with a leaf. And I like to start with my light and kind of do an all over. So this is Granny Apple Green light. Okay, and then I pick up the dark. So you can decide, do you want your dark, I'm going to use the small end. Do you want your dark just down the vein? Do you want it to be on the outside? I thought maybe I would let the outside be dark. This time. So I've got the edges of my leaves darker. And then I like to go back over with the light and kind of help it blend out. And then I have daffodil here, and I thought it might be fun, even if I've already got this green down, if you add a little bit of yellow, sometimes it'll kind of spread and let that yellow have some space. Otherwise you can start with the yellow, like I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow to the tip of my leaf, just for fun. I love playing with the blends and seeing what they can do. And then let's go with the light. And the dark. Okay, and then I like to go back over with the light and kind of blend out my lines. Okay, so that's how I do my leaves. And then let's show you an apple. So again, this is now, I'm using Poppy Parade light. Maybe I'll do Sorbet. Nah, I'm going to stick with what I did before. Okay, Poppy Parade light. I'm going to do the whole apple. And then I'm going to bring in that yellow. I'm just going to give it a little yellow here. And see, it kind of pushed that red aside a little bit. Then I'm going to go in with the dark. And I'm going to get the edges here a little darker. And then I'm going to go back in with the light and kind of blend it all in again. And you can go over some of that yellow if you went too dark with it. And I think I want to bring a little bit more back in. Move the yellow. Get kind of a little fun blended little yellow spot there. And I want this to be darker. I missed a little spot there. Okay. It's bugging me. Alright, you can just keep playing with that and going on and on and on. So there is water blends, an apple. Let me find the finished one. Here it is. So you can see I've got my finished one there. But now I thought, can I do no line? Like I hear people say no line watercolor, right, which is this. And I thought, what about no line blends? Can we do that? So let's do it. See what that looks like. So here's my lined blends. And so again, I'm going to stamp. Now I'm not using Memento, I'm using my Sahara sand. And I'm going to do the same thing we did before, where we're going to ink it up and stamp it off. And then ink up very lightly. And then we're going to just do the exact same thing we did. So I think that the blends are going to make me lose my lines. I'm not going to see them as well. So, because I'm thinking that that water-based ink is just going to smear away. So let's go ahead and do some dark. Add a little bit of yellow. And then help blend out those lines with the light again. Do a little cleanup of this edge. Okay. And then same thing with the leaf. I want my light. And go in with the dark. Adding a little yellow, and then blending out the lines so they're not as harsh. So I've got no line blends, and I have a finished one of those. There. So you've got Stampin' Blends with the lines, the black line, and see how you can see the yellow tips on the leaves. I think that looks really pretty. And then without the lines, so the lines are barely there. Kind of gives it a whole different look, a little softer. So it depends what you're going for. They're both really fun. I love playing with that, adding that little bit of yellow in. It's really kind of a fun thing. So then I thought, okay, now let's try pencils. Let's put these away. And I've got my pencils. Now, our pencils come in two collections. There's assortment 1 and assortment 2, and I'm using a little bit from both. I think they're really pretty inexpensive and I love them. So I think getting both collections is a great thing to have on hand. Now, some of you might say, okay, what about the old regular markers? And you know, maybe we'll try that as well. I like the regular markers for some things. Like you can use regular markers and color directly onto a stamp if you wanted to maybe get 2 different colors on an image. So that they have their purpose, but as far as coloring in, ever since we came out with the Stampin' Blends, I can't go back to the regular markers, but we'll try it. I bet I can make something look nice. Okay, so here is how I use our pencils. I kind of do them the same way with the blends. I like to give a light layer over the whole thing by very light pressure, and I'm kind of just doing a light layer of, this is the real red. And I'm just holding it lightly and giving it an all over color. And then if you want to do a little darker, you can press a little harder, or you can go up to the next color, which is Cherry Cobbler. And I'm going to do a combination of those things. I'm going to do Cherry Cobbler right at the edges, where I want to give that look of roundedness. But I'm also going to just give slightly darker pressure with the real red. So by pressing harder and lighter, you're going to get more darker values, lighter values. And you can add that yellow in like we did with the blends. So colored pencils are really fun. And these are not just colored pencils. They're watercolor colored pencils. They're water soluble, which means if you wanted to, you can add water on top of this and use them that way. I feel like if I'm going to watercolor, I like to use the ink, but this is a fun way to go too. I've got so many different samples going on today, I thought I'm not going to do that one today. You can also color them with our blending pens, blending markers, which are these. But I'm just going to use straight pencil today. Alright, so many different versions going on. So that's the apple, and then for the leaf, I'm going to do the same thing. All over light. This is Granny Apple Green. And then the darker green that's in the pencil assortment is Garden Green, so I'm going to bring in some of that. So you've got some nice darks and lights and your apples. Let me show you a finished colored pencil. So there's that one. This is colored pencil. And then, I'm not going to show you again how to stamp these stamp off, but here is colored pencil, no line color pencil. So I just did it again where I stamped off on the side and then stamped in a light color, and then I was able to color my apples the no line way. So there you've got line and no line colored pencil. So while I'm still here, let's try regular markers, just because I didn't do that ahead of time, so I don't have any samples to show you there. So we're just gonna see what happens. So this is our stamp. Oh, I forgot, I want to show you on black paper. I just decided I was just playing, and I did black paper as well. All right, so here's my, see how crisp that is? It's such a nice image. It's a really great, well quality stamp. Okay, so let's grab, let's see, real red, poppy, olive, granny, maybe even Tahitian tide. Okay, and some kind of brown. All right, so let's just start with the apple. I'm going to go with my lighter. Which one is this one? Poppy. And color it. So the difference with the blends is that they do different things. When you color with the blends, you can draw a line over it and you won't see it. In fact, let me get a scrap paper here and show you what I mean. So I'm going to take, this is just a regular marker, and I'm going to go over it like this. And you can see where I went over it twice, or where the lines overlap. You see the little brush strokes, right? And then with the blends, see how you don't see all those little lines? So no little lines, lines. So that's kind of why these are great for coloring. Now with a small image like the apple, I think it's still okay to use, to do that. The lines, and they don't bother me. It's nothing wrong with the lines. It's just that I'm so used to using these blends now. So here I'm using a darker red to kind of go on the sides. You know, and you can even use the same red. Remember how I showed you how you got a dark line here and get a darker value with the same red by just going over it. Now I can't add that yellow. Well, let's try it. Let's see what happens if I add some yellow on top. We're experimenting. So I'm just going to add some yellow on top. It doesn't really do anything. It just kind of sits in there and gets kind of brown. Alright, so you can't really do that like we did with the blends. But you can still get a nice image here. Now let's color. So this is the new Parakeet Party, and then I'm going to go over it with some Granny Apple Green. See what happens. And maybe if I want to get even darker, I could throw some Old Olive on there. So you can see you can get some darks and lights, and you can play around with your coloring, and I'm sure you can do some nice things with the markers. And I do love my markers. They absolutely have their place. Let me show you one way I love them since I've got it here. Let's say you want to color on a stamp. You can absolutely grab your marker, and let's say you want your thanks one color, and your, I forget what that says, for your kindness. We'll see when we stamp it. And you can and of course this is an outline stamp, but sometimes we have solid image stamps and coloring. See, so you got two different colors like that. So you can do that. You can't do that with the blends because these are like a Sharpie. So if you were to ink your rubber stamp, you're going to permanently color your rubber stamp, and it's not really, maybe if you go really fast you might get some of the ink to transfer, but it's not meant for that at all. You'll get a really wonky image, and you'll permanently color your stamp. Okay, So if you're still here, I know I'm showing a lot, but I just really love to color, and there's just so many ways to do it, and I really wanted to show that off. I'll finish this one and post it on my blog so you can see it. All right, so what about black ink, black paper, or a dark colored paper? That could be fun too. So this here, I embossed the image. I love how crisp that is. I've said that so many times. I've embossed the image in white. Okay, and so you can do some fun things there. You can leave it just like this. It's really pretty. And then I thought, what would happen if I used colored pencil on black? Now, sometimes, I mean, markers are not going to show up on black. You're not going to see a thing. Blends are not going to show up on black. You won't see a thing. But sometimes you can get colored pencil to show up a little bit. Because I've embossed, some of those areas are going to pick up that pigment too. So I thought I would show you. One thing you can do is you can put an underlayer of white. So you're going to go with your white pencil and just give it a nice little layer of white. Now this could be fun all by itself. If you were to color all your images in white and use that on a card, that could look really pretty. Just like a black and white photo, or just kind of something a little bit more artsy and less realistic, just kind of fun. So I'm giving my apples a little bit of color with the white, and then you can do that, or take your pencil. Now we're going to go over, and it will show. So obviously it's on black, so it's not showing up a lot. And this particular stamp has a lot of little white highlights, so those, it's funny, the marker doesn't want to stick to the embossed powder. It's just too slick, and the markers just slide right off, and the watercolor. But when this pencil goes on there, it does stain. Isn't that fun? So you get that kind of really bright, kind of crazy orangey red. It's really fun. And so you got that. And then let's say you want to do your leaves. You can just go straight on the black, or you can do the same thing with that white, or you can do a little bit of both. Give it some highlight. That white will make it show up a little more. So you can do this, and what you get when you're done is this, and I think that looks really fun. Okay, so this is colored pencil, Stampin' Up watercolor pencils, but I didn't use any water. And I did the same thing on the back. I took the white and I kind of fuzzed out the backing, and then I went over it with, they're calling it balmy blue, but on the black it looks bright. So I ended up using my Tahitian Tide as my accent. So that's really fun. And all I did here was, this is a regular black and white strip of paper. It looks like this. And I just took my Tahitian Tide Stampin' Blends and just colored the white areas, and then now they're blue, and that's how I got this. I hope you like that one. Okay, I have one more, and I want to show you what I did with that one because I love it. I think it's really fun. Let's see if my video stopped on me. No, amazing. Lately my video has been running off on me. I think it's because I talk too long and then my video cuts out. It says, surely she must be done. Okay, now I'm doing Stampin' Pastels. Okay, so I like pastels. I think they're fun. I don't use them enough, as you can see. And I have used them, but I just don't use them a lot. And so I was really excited to try this. And it's hard to color tiny images. I've done backgrounds with the pastels, or I've done a flower with a Q-tip and just kind of helped blend it in. But here I'm going to kind of be, I don't know, I want to say artsy, but that's probably giving myself a little too much credit. So I'm going to look for a sharp edge, and sometimes you can break your chalk in half. These are chalk pastels, not as different to oil pastels, so they are chalky. And here I just stamped in craft white. That is what that is. I didn't want that raised embossed edge with the embossed white, just because I thought when I was drawing that would catch too much and I'd have too much powder dust and all that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm gonna look for a sharper edge. If I have to get myself one, I just kind of go off to the side. And here I'm just gonna be loose. I'm just coloring in the leaves. And it's gonna look crazy at first, but I think it gets good at the end. So stick with me. I think I did the apples first last time, and that was probably wise, because they were the star of the show, and I want to be able to get them right. I don't want to mess them up with my green. So I'm going to stop here and do my apples really quick. Okay, so for the apple, I'm going to grab this one, and they're calling this Poppy, I believe. Yep. Okay, so this I've used probably the most, and I don't have a real sharp corner anymore, but I'm going to, look how great that looks on the black. I'm going to get my apple, and I'm not looking for a smooth edge here. I'm looking for a chalkboard look, chalk look. I want it to look like chalk. So I like that I can still see some of that black through my apple. And I'm trying to not lose my lines because I want that outline. Okay, really fast little chalk drawing, and I think it looks really fun. And it was really fun. And you've etched it into that paper. I can go like this, and you can see I smear it just barely, and I'm, you know, scraping my hand on it, so it'll be fine, like without any issues. If you don't like any little areas, you can use an eraser and pick that up. But here's what I did with this one, my finished project. So there it is. And I think that's pretty fun. So how I finished up these cards was I think I showed you this paper here, and then I used an embossing folder called Gingham Embossing Folder, and I gave myself a little gingham sheet here that's 4 by 5 1/4, and these are 5 1/4 by 1 1/2, and there's just a little strip there of an accent color. So here I used Tahitian Tide, and I used the Thanks for Your Kindness on that one. Now this scalloped rectangle is from the Scallop Contours dies, and that's really fun when I use that one all the time. And that's it. And I did another one, so I just wanted to change it up. And then for Card Buffet, I think we'll do, you know, people can color however they want. But here, this one is the pencil. This is colored pencil, no line colored pencil. And here I've got the Hope You're Feeling Better. And it's the same idea, same paper, but I just colored it with my Parakeet Party blends, and then I used a little bit of Parakeet Party Baker's Twine on there as well. I got a little loop there that drives me cuckoo bear. Okay. And so there it is, no line pencil. Stampin' Pastels. Here we've got pencil with lines. So imagine the difference there, pencil without lines. Here we've got Stampin' Blends with lines, Stampin' Blends without lines. Oops, I picked up watercolor without lines, watercolor with lines. So many fun options. What is your favorite way to color? If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. And I'm going to post the finished cards at my blog, so you can look at them, or my Pinterest page will have the finished ones, or Instagram or Facebook. so you don't have to pause the video. And thank you so much for watching. And if you made it all the way to the end, please subscribe and hit the little notification bell so you'll get notified of upcoming videos. Thank you. Bye-bye.